World of Warcraft's popularity may have steadily declined over the past few years. However, the game still gets us excited whenever a new expansion is announced. Is it just nostalgia? Is it the hope that the game might finally be returning to its glory days? Maybe it's a little bit of both. Or maybe it's just the fact that a new expansion always brings with it a new cinematic. To celebrate the recently announced Dragonflight, the latest World of Warcraft expansion, we decided to rewatch all of the game's cinematics and rank them from worst to best, including, of course, the newest ones from Dragonflight itself. We purposely waited until the new expansion got announced before putting together this list because we wanted to see how the Dragonflight trailer stacked up against all the other WoW cinematics. Spoiler alert, it's not that amazing, but we'll get into that a bit later. Before we begin, it's worth noting that we won't be ranking any in-game cutscenes or animated shorts, so stuff like Warbringers or the Afterlife series is not part of this list, for example. Some of those are good, very good even, but they're not as visually impressive as the big-budget cinematics we all know and love. With that out of the way, let's jump straight into it, shall we?
It was a bear?
In a hat!
I'm guessing most people either aren't familiar with this first one or have completely forgot about seeing it. Bottoms Up is a very short cinematic about an orc and a human having a drink at a tavern, discussing their encounter with Chen Stormstout. Chronologically, this takes place after the events of the Mists of Pandaria launch trailer. However, the 30-second cinematic came out about 2 years after that trailer, towards the end of the expansion. The short is pretty funny and features the same two characters we saw in the Moth trailer, but it's overall not very memorable compared to most other WoW cinematics found on this list. Next up, we have another short cinematic, this one having a runtime of about 1 minute or so once you skip all the logos. The cinematic shows Gul'dan freeing Illidan from his prison and, in the process, setting into motion many of the events we see at the beginning of the Legion expansion. It's somewhat ironic that Illidan is the one who eventually ends up killing his liberator. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it though. We could go on about how Illidan became corrupted by the School of Gul'dan in the original timeline and how he destroyed said skull in the alternate timeline of Legion, but we don't want to turn this into a lore rant. Suffice it to say that this video is a nice callback to Warcraft 3 and foreshadows the future of both characters. The main reason why it's not higher up on our list is because it's one of the shortest WoW cinematics out there. That, and the fact that it's probably not very impactful for those unfamiliar with Warcraft lore.
Beyond the veil lies the Shadowlands.
Alright, so I'm gonna be perfectly honest here. I completely forgot that this cinematic even existed. Upon rewatching it recently, I vaguely remembered seeing it around the launch of Shadowlands, but it evidently didn't really leave a lasting impression on me. And it's not even necessarily bad or anything. The problem with Beyond the Veil lies in the fact that it's so incredibly generic that it makes Shadowlands look like a budget version of Warhammer Fantasy with a splash of Age of Sigmar thrown into the mix. Which, let's be honest here, that's not entirely far from the truth. You can already feel a lot of those influences in game, but they're a lot more obvious in this trailer. Beyond the Veil does get some points for trying to replicate the old style of WoW cinematics we've seen in both Vanilla and Burning Crusade. The trailer focuses almost entirely on the new zones and factions introduced by the Shadowlands expansion, which was a breath of fresh air at the time. But looking back on it now, the cinematic doesn't really hold up nearly as well as most others on this list.
I will not lead the Horde. I didn't ask.
Battle for Azeroth was one of the worst World of Warcraft expansions in terms of content, but one of the best in terms of cinematics. In addition to the launch trailer, we got almost 20 minutes worth of additional cinematics, which together form what is essentially a short movie. Safe Haven is the third of these videos, and sees Sourfan reuniting with his old friend, Thrall. Thrall was one of the most interesting characters in Warcraft 3, but it always felt like Blizzard didn't really know what to do with him in World of Warcraft. The former Horde Warchief went AWOL at the start of the Legion expansion and would not make another in-game appearance until a few years later in the Battle for Azeroth expansion. This cinematic was meant to be a big reveal for the return of Thrall, but I don't think it was as exciting as Blizzard wanted it to be. As with all WoW cinematics, Safe Haven looks amazing, but the narrative here feels rushed. One moment Thrall talks about being happy with his family and his new home in the Grand. The next he does a complete 180, dusts off his weapon, and returns with Sourfang to the Horde. And this is immediately after being attacked by assassins, who may or may not have friends waiting around for Thrall to leave so they can attack his family. Presumably, he took some precautions before leaving, but that's not shown or even implied in the cinematic. All that aside, we still enjoyed this video, and we were happy to see Thrall in the World of Warcraft cinematic for the first time. We do wish the pacing was a little bit better though.
For Azeroth!
The Legion launch trailer came out a couple months after the teaser we mentioned earlier, but it did not feature either Gul'dan or Illidan. Instead, the cinematic revolves around the forces of Azeroth banding together and taking the fight to the Burning Legion. Sounds pretty epic, right? Well, in actuality, the video is mostly about Varian Wryn's internal monologue, with only a couple of interesting action sequences here and there. The problem with this trailer is that it focuses too much on one character. That's not a bad thing in of itself, but I feel like this would have been the perfect opportunity to show that all races of Azeroth fighting together against the common foe of the Burning Legion. Sylvanas is shoehorned into the trailer, basically just to convey that this is what's supposed to be happening, but she doesn't say anything, and there are no other characters aside from her and Varian. On a positive note, the writing, voice acting, music, and cinematography are definitely on point here. The fighting scenes are decent, the airships look amazing, and Varian's speech for Anduin bears more than a passing resemblance to the speech Arthas received from his father. There are some interesting parallels we can draw between Arthas and Anduin, but let's not get ahead of ourselves, because their stories don't come full circle until Shadowlands. At the end of the day, if you're an Alliance player, chances are you'll enjoy this cinematic a bit more than a Horde player. This is arguably one of the blandest WoW cinematics from the perspective of the Horde. To be fair, Blizzard did give Horde characters more love than a lot of other cinematics, so we can't really blame them too much for wanting to focus more on the Alliance with this one. We just wish the trailer was a bit more interesting. That's all.
The world is healing, but her fate is yet uncertain.
The latest World of Warcraft cinematic is finally here, along with details regarding the new expansion, Dragonflight. The new expansion looks pretty good based on what we've seen so far, but the cinematic felt underwhelming to me. It does have a unique vibe, but features a few standout moments. You can definitely tell that Blizzard's art department wanted to try out something new with this one, but in my opinion, it really didn't pan out. The trailer starts by showing events that happened 10,000 years ago in the past, so I immediately assumed we would see something about the War of the Ancients. Instead, we only get a passing mention of the events surrounding it. Following the destruction of the Well of Eternity during the War of the Ancients, the world is being torn asunder, and the Dragonflights leave their ancestral home to help the races of Azeroth in the fight against the Burning Legion. During their absence, stone constructs known as the Watchers are charged with protecting the Dragon Isles, but based on what we see in the trailer, the constructs become dormant immediately after the dragons leave. So much for keeping an eye on things, huh? The cinematic then picks up during the present and follows a Watcher as it attempts to reactivate the beacon that helps the dragons find their way back home. There's not a whole lot else going on here, I'm afraid. We do get to see Alexstrasza and a bunch of other dragons near the end, but that's about it. I mean, it's fine, but nothing to write home about either. The trailer feels painfully mediocre compared to other WoW cinematics, but hopefully the expansion itself will end up being good.
Why didn't you kill me?
Could kill you now.
Lost Honor is the second cinematic we got for Battle of Azeroth, excluding the expansion's launch trailer, of course. We don't have a clear timeline for the story, but it seems to take place shortly after the battle for Lordaeron, which we saw in the aforementioned trailer. During the battle, Sourfang ends up getting captured by the Alliance and is now being held prisoner in Stormwind. The video opens up with a wide shot of the Stormwind port that looks simply gorgeous. While the city itself isn't nearly as massive in-game, this video gives us an idea of Stormwind's true scale as described by the lore. The other thing that immediately stands out about this cinematic is the attention to detail. We get some nice close-up shots of Anduin in the opening seconds, where he looks stunningly realistic. You can see the peach fuzz on his chin, blemishes on his skin, wrinkles in his forehead, and various other imperfections and small details. An enormous amount of work must have gone into bringing Anduin to life, and we can't help but be impressed by the quality of the first part of the video. The rest of the cinematic looks great as well, but because it takes place in a dark prison cell, a lot of the detail ends up getting lost. Even though this is one of the best looking WoW cinematics we've seen so far, it's very predictable and doesn't add too much in terms of narrative. Not really anyway. A good cinematic overall, but there's definitely better ones out there.
And all will burn beneath the shadow of my wings.
Cataclysm remains one of the most controversial World of Warcraft expansions to this day. This was the expansion where Blizzard decided to give Azeroth a facelift by having a massive dragon set most of the world on fire. I think a lot of the players would agree that changing the old zones, drastically in some places, wasn't a great call, but we do have to admit the way in which they chose to do it was pretty epic. The Cataclysm trailer is iconic for a number of reasons. First off, the voice acting and music are incredible, and do a great job of selling Deathwing as a world-ending villain. Moreover, seeing beloved landmarks like the Booty Bay Goblin statue or the Darkshore Bridge get ripped to pieces was quite shocking when this trailer first came out. It no longer has the same impact these days, but watching Deathwing's path of destruction is still pretty cool. Having said all that, it can be hard to enjoy the trailer without engaging in some good old suspension of disbelief. It's not really possible for a dragon the size of Deathwing to tear apart the world like he does in that trailer. Don't get me wrong, he's big, but he's not that big. Meanwhile, towards the end of the trailer, we see Deathwing landing gingerly on a cathedral and inflicting minimal damage to it. If you ask me, the whole thing just seems a bit inconsistent. Deathwing somehow manages to deal tons more damage to Azeroth than Sargeras did during Legion.
The world is healing.
And that guy is almost as big as the entire planet itself. Something doesn't add up there. But still, a pretty good cinematic.
That power will be your prison.
This world is a prison.
I can already hear people complaining about this one, and I don't blame you. Is the fact that Sylvanas was able to defeat the Lich King without breaking a sweat absurd and dumb? Yeah. But does the fight look awesome? It sure does. The story of World of Warcraft was already pretty nonsensical by this point, and it quickly became clear that Blizzard was determined to give Sylvanas the strongest plot armor ever seen in gaming. She was essentially WoW's main character by the time Shadowlands rolled around, and so of course she was able to win the fight against Bolvar. Some people might say that she fought the discount Lich King instead of the real one, which... true, but Blizzard ultimately still dropped the ball by making Sylvanas incredibly overpowered out of the blue. Still, at least it gave us an epic cinematic fight scene before rooting the character even more during Shadowlands. Also, we do have to give it up to Blizzard for the amazing plot twist at the end. After playing World of Warcraft for years, it's pretty easy to predict where the story's going next, but that was not the case here. I think few people would have expected Sylvanas to break the Helm of Domination instead of using it to become the first Lich Queen. Say what you want about the rest of the trailer, but that scene was pure awesome.
To ask why we fight is to ask why the leaves fall. It is in their nature.
WoW cinematics aren't really known for their humor, and neither is the game itself. Blizzard took a big chance with this trailer, and it could have easily blown up in their faces. But fortunately, it didn't. While the expansion drew a lot of criticisms at the time, the trailer was received positively by most people and continues to be one of the most popular World of Warcraft cinematics to this day. I was one of those people that absolutely hated the idea of pandas in World of Warcraft, and I avoided playing the expansion purely because of that. In hindsight, though, I missed out on a lot of fun. Judging by some of the expansions that came after it, it's safe to say that Mists of Pandaria was actually a really good expansion in the grand scheme of things. I still have not changed my mind about those pandas, though. But despite unjustifiably hating the expansion for a long time, I can never, ever bring myself to hate this trailer. The cinematic has everything: action, comedy, great music, great voice acting, beautiful cinematography, you name it. I feel like Blizzard should have used this same type of playfulness for some of their future cinematics, but sadly, they never did. Well, you can see it in other Blizzard games like Overwatch, but not in World of Warcraft. So why is this cinematic not higher up in this list if we enjoyed it so much? Well, truth be told, it's mainly because we enjoyed the next ones even more.
4 years have passed since the mortal races banded together and stood united against the might of the Burning Legion. Though Azeroth was saved, the tenuous pact between the Horde and the Alliance has all but evaporated. The drums of war thunder once again.
This is where it all began almost 2 decades ago. The very first cinematic trailer for World of Warcraft is so old that it predates YouTube and most of the websites we take for granted these days. Despite its age, however, the trailer still looks amazing all things considered. Blizzard became known for its high-quality cinematics even before World of Warcraft. The studio put together quite a few of them during the days of Warcraft 3, some of which continue to be remembered fondly to this day. But this was arguably the first cinematic that managed to break into the mainstream and capture the imagination of millions of people all over the world. Now, I won't pretend that WoW's first trailer is as visually impressive as its more recent ones. It's not. The models and animations have aged a bit, and the art style definitely looked more cartoony back then. Later cinematics would gradually start to resemble short animated movies, while this one still looks very much like a quote-unquote traditional video game trailer, which is by no means a bad thing. However, I feel like trailers that incorporate narrative elements are better than those that don't. Ultimately, this is one of the most memorable game cinematics out there, and did a fantastic job at getting people interested in World of Warcraft. I suspect many people started playing the game because of this very trailer. I know I did. I even made my first ever character an Undead Warlock because of this trailer. But in hindsight, the cinematic could have been even better by incorporating just some story elements.
So, you know me. Is that it? What I've seen? What I've done?
Next up, we have Old Soldier. This is another Battle for Azeroth cinematic that follows Saurfang, as well as a secondary character known as the Khan. The character isn't particularly important to the overall story, but he acts as a perfect juxtaposition to Saurfang in this video. Just like Saurfang, Zakan is someone who lost everything, and now the Horde is the only family he has left. But unlike Saurfang, he is young, naive, and still believes that there can be glory and honor in the battle ahead. Needless to say, Saurfang doesn't share that same sentiment. In fact, he is someone who saw more than his fair share of senseless wars and plans to make the upcoming battle his last, so that he can finally join his loved ones in the afterlife. That is, of course, until Zakan convinces him to
Live another day.
Chronologically, Old Soldier is the first cinematic in the series, and one of the reasons why it works so well is because it gives so much needed context. The trailer kicks off with flashbacks to the showing of Death of Saurfang Sung and the burning of Teldrassil, 2 events that would ultimately lead the Old Warrior to give up hope completely. Well, almost. Old Soldier is likely to elicit an emotional reaction, and maybe even a tear or two, even if you don't know anything about World of Warcraft. It's a real shame that the Axel expansion was so bad that it makes this cinematic really feel like false advertising.
Sylvanas Windrunner! I challenge Makora!
Reckoning is the last cinematic in the Battle for Azeroth series, and takes place sometime after Safe Haven. Saurfang, alongside Thrawn and Anduin, bring an army comprised of both Horde and Alliance forces to the gates of Orgrimmar, and are ready to lay siege to the city in order to stop Sylvanas once and for all. In an attempt to stop further bloodshed, Saurfang decides to challenge the Banshee Queen to Makora, despite knowing that the duel will probably end in his death. This cinematic is jam-packed with tear-jerking moments, from Sourfang's willingness to sacrifice himself for the sake of his people to his final battle cry, which showed that in the end, he placed the safety of Azeroth above everything else. We also get to see the Horde turning against Sylvanas after Sourfang tricks her into revealing her true colors. You can even see a little smile on his face when that happens. Not only did he manage to fulfill his mission, but he knew the honorable death he's been yearning for is now finally at hand. There are, of course, other great moments here, like Anduin giving Sourfang his sword, or the Undead Flag Bearer's reaction when Sylvanas insults the Horde.
The Horde is nothing!
Then, there's the fact that Sylvanas cheated during Markara by using magic, thus winning the duel in a dishonorable method. It feels like most Markaras will end with one participant's cheating. Gul'dan cheated during the duel of Durotan in the Warcraft movie, Thrall cheated when dueling against Garrosh, and now this. I guess the real lesson here is that if you're a warrior, don't challenge magic users to Markara. This is easily one of my personal favorite WoW cinematics for one simple reason: Illidan. First introduced in Warcraft 3, Illidan quickly became a fan favorite thanks to his appearance, voice, and just overall badassery. It's no surprise that Blizzard chose him as the main antagonist for WoW's first expansion, and years later made him the poster boy for yet another expansion in Legion. Illidan's introduction to World of Warcraft via this trailer was amazing. The cinematic starts off with his menacing voice issuing a warning to anyone foolish enough to enter his realm, followed up by one of the most iconic quotes in WoW history.
You are not prepared.
That line alone is enough to give goosebumps to anyone who was playing the game at that time, and we get to hear Illidan saying it twice in the cinematic. The second time is far more threatening than the first. As far as the rest of the trailer is concerned, it's pretty similar to WoW's first cinematic. We get introduced to the 2 new races added in Burning Crusade, and then get to watch a quick montage of awesomeness. Some of the scenes here are pure gold, like when that mage uses Polymorph in the Tauren, or the Blood Elf Priest using Holy Nova. It's great. Even if you don't like the trailer, you at least have to give it credit for showcasing actual in-game spells and abilities. While not noticeable at the time, it's easy to see on mod monitors that there was a significant improvement in visual quality between the first WoW cinematic and this one. However, the biggest jump in quality happened with the release of the next cinematic.
My son, the day you were born, the very forests of Lordaeron whispered the name Arthas.
Next up, we have what many would consider the best cinematic Blizzard has ever made. Now, personally, I wouldn't go that far. I consider the StarCraft 2 and Legacy of the Void trilogy to be the best, but I do think this is one of the most memorable, and it's also the most important. More than just a World of Warcraft icon, the Lich King is a gaming icon, and this trailer helped cement the character in the minds of gamers and non-gamers alike. To say that the Lich King is also one of Blizzard's best villains would be another statement. Blizzard were fully aware of the popularity of the character even before WoW was a thing. Arthas' journey from Paladin to Lich King of Warcraft 3 remains to this day one of the best storylines ever created by the studio. Having an entire expansion revolve around the character was a no-brainer, and so was making this trailer focus solely on him. This is another one of those cinematics that hits hard if you're familiar with the story of Warcraft 3. That speech we hear throughout the trailer was originally given by Arthas' father, King Tyrannus Menethil II, back when Arthas was still a paladin and the Prince of Lordaeron. His words were clearly meant for the person Arthas once was, and the person he was supposed to become once he ascended the throne. But instead of following in his father's footsteps, Arthas ended up killing him, destroying Lordaeron, becoming the antithesis of what King Tyrannus envisioned. Granted, in the end, Arthas did become a king himself, albeit a completely different type of king. Blizzard recently revealed a remastered version of the iconic cinematic to celebrate the announcement of Wrath of the Lich King Classic. I'm curious to see how many people return for the expansion. I know I will.
Stand as one for the Alliance!
The folks making WoW cinematics certainly had their work cut out for them during the Battle for Azeroth expansion. Cynics might say that they were trying to compensate for the weak expansion content, and we don't necessarily disagree with that assessment, but regardless of their reasons, they definitely did a great job, especially with the launch trailer. It picks up shortly after the Old Soldier cinematic and sees the Alliance and the Horde battling among the ruins of Lordaeron. As far as fight scenes are concerned, this trailer has the best ones, bar none. This is also the first time we've seen a large-scale battle between two factions in cinematic form, and it looks just as epic as you expect. Unsurprisingly, the faction leaders get the most screen time, but we do see plenty of regular soldiers fighting as well. There's siege engines, magic, battle cries, drama, and everything else you could want from a trailer clearly inspired by Hollywood war movies. Only it's arguably better than most war movies since this is a rich fantasy setting where visual artists come with their imagination run wild. And Blizzard's artists most definitely did not hold back with this one. I know this is going to sound cliche, but the only thing wrong with this trailer is that they didn't make it longer. Honestly, I think everybody would have been happy if Blizzard skipped this expansion entirely and used that money to make a 2-hour movie instead, or a Netflix series like Arcane. Perhaps one day they will do that. I really hope they do.
And what, Gul'dan, must we give in return? Everything.
And last, but certainly not least, we had the Warlords of Draenor trailer. It's ironic that some of the worst expansions got some of the best cinematics, huh? The story of Warlords of Draenor is even more tragic than that of Battle for Azeroth, because this expansion had massive potential, and everybody had huge expectations for it. Those expectations only grew even more after the official release of this trailer, to the point where it may have been impossible for Blizzard to ever live up to them, no matter how hard they tried. But we still wish they would have at least tried. The premise for this expansion was simply incredible, and it's a shame that we'll probably never get to see it fully realized. We did at least get to see a glimpse of it in this trailer though. Just like the Wrath of the Lich King trailer, this cinematic was also put together with longtime fans in mind. Blizzard combined the old with the new by having Garrosh travel back in time to stop his father and the other Norks in Draenor from drinking the blood of Manaroth, and becoming corrupted by the Pit Lord and his crony, Gul'dan. By doing so, he basically creates an alternate timeline where orcs become conquerors instead of slaves, as Grom famously put near the end of the trailer.
We will never be slaves! But we will be conquerors.
But by far, The best part of the cinematic is the callback to Warcraft 3, when Thrall and Grom go up against Manaroth. In the original timeline, Grom dies after slaying the Pit Lord, and he would have died here too, much in the same manner, if it wasn't for Garrosh saving him at the last second. The entire premise of this trailer was brilliant, and perfectly executed as far as I'm concerned, and it's the best WoW cinematic to date in my opinion. So what's your favorite World of Warcraft cinematic? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you're a boss level gamer. Until next time, we'll see you later.